All righty. Welcome. I am Heather Pierce Campbell, the legal website warrior. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington, and working with online entrepreneurs throughout the US and the world. Welcome to another episode of Guts, Grit, and Great Business. I am so excited to introduce you today to Stephan Spencer. Welcome, Stephan.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm so excited about the conversation we're going to have because I know it's going to be like unlike anything else I've had on the podcast to date. And you are the guy to talk to about SEO and I think a few other things based on my listening of your podcast. So I'm excited to introduce you to folks who are going to be with us here today or whenever they hear this. So for those of you that don't know Stephan Spencer, Stephan is an internationally recognized SEO expert, best-selling author, and sought-after keynote speaker. His clients have included Zappos, Chanel, Quicksilver, Bed Bath & Beyond, Volvo, Sony, and many others. He is the co-author of The Art of SEO, author of Google Power Search, and co-author of Social E-commerce, all published by O'Reilly. Stephan founded Net Concepts in 1995 and grew it into a multinational SEO agency before selling it to Covario. Stephan is a frequent TV guest, appearing on various ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, and the CW affiliates. He's a contributor to Harvard Business Review, Adweek, Founder Magazine, and Search Engine Land. He hosts two popular podcasts, Get Yourself Optimized and Marketing Speak. Stephan, I don't have anybody else with this bio.
That's because that would be unique to me.
Well, it's a good one. There's so much in there I feel like we could dig into, but I'm just so happy to have you here today. Thanks a lot for joining.
It's a pleasure. And I've been looking forward to this.
Good. Yeah, it's taken us a little bit to get this scheduled. One of the other reasons that Stephan and I connected is because we're in a mastermind group together, and there have just been some phenomenal folks in that group. It's been such a joy to connect with people and really around the world and hear what people are up to. So I've been looking forward to this as well.
Yes. And I'm a connoisseur of fine masterminds. I'm in, I think, 5 at the moment.
Are you? You're like,
I don't know how I find the time for it, but it's fun.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's hilarious. You're like, remind me which one we're in again. I know.
Yeah, exactly. Genius Network, JVMM, Strategic Coach, Silver Circle, Metal.
That's hilarious. I think you need to add connoisseur of fine masterminds on your bio. I think it really needs to be in there. Well, Stephan, talk to us. So I'm just going to admit flat out, like I know very little and a lot less than I should about SEO. So tell me, I'm really curious how you got started in the world of SEO.
Yeah, well, I was studying for a PhD in biochemistry back in the 90s. And I decided after meeting, first of all, I heard Tim Berners-Lee speak at this conference. It's called the Second International World Wide Web Conference. And he, of course, is the inventor of the World Wide Web. So I was quite inspired by that. But then I met one of the guys from Netscape. This was prior to everybody hearing about Netscape and then using it. It was when everyone was still using the Mosaic browser. So this is very early on in the evolution of the web, 1994. And I was very inspired. I just wanted to start an internet company. So I dropped out of my PhD and started an internet agency. And started it in 1995 and grew it. Got this crazy idea that I could move to New Zealand. And I did. I applied for residency and got in. This was 4 years into running the business in 1999. And it was beautiful, amazing country, loved it. And my kids got an incredible experience growing up there. It's just magical. And we came back to the States in 2007, and I ended up selling the agency in 2010. And then I started another SEO company. But getting into SEO specifically happened in, I'd say, about 1996, maybe. It was was early days of my agency. We were building websites, and we needed to figure out how to get them to rank higher in search engines, and Google wasn't around at that point. And yeah, there were tools out there that created these landing pages for each search engine because each one had its own algorithms, and so that was just ridiculous. But I wanted to reverse engineer how search engines worked, and specifically when Google showed up, then I really wanted to double down on figuring that algorithm out, because Google was light years ahead of everything else at the time,
Right.
and continues to be so. There's
Yeah.
really no other competitor to
Right.
Google. And yeah, just kind of reverse engineering that black
Mm-hmm.
box and figuring out what works and what doesn't work very
Mm-hmm.
empirically and scientifically, using the scientific
Mm-hmm.
method, because I had that science background. I was studying, as I
Yeah.
said, for a PhD in biochemistry, and I had a master's in it. I had a bachelor's in cellular and molecular biology, and it was all about doing experiments, lab work,
Mm-hmm.
bench work, figuring this stuff out, and
Mm-hmm.
being able to do it reproducibly.
Yeah.
So that's how I started to really focus on SEO. And one thing that really ended up being a boon to the business was moving to New Zealand for personal reasons, because I just had this intuitive hit that it would be an incredible place to live, and it was. And turns out that I was able to hire really top shelf talent for a fraction of the price of what it would cost in the US. And that was
Mm-hmm.
because of the very favorable exchange rate at the time. And also the kinds of clients that we had were really appealing, international brand names like Birdseye, that folks in New Zealand had heard of, and they wanted to work on those kinds of accounts, not just a little small business in New Zealand. So we
Right.
got really, really phenomenal people working for us, and we were able to compete uh, really well with top agencies, SEO agencies in the States. And yeah, it was really a great experience. But then something happened in 2003 that was a game changer, and I was frustrated by a particular client, a well-known brand I won't mention, but begins with a K, and people shop there for clothes, so you can figure that one out. And that client was just so sure that we were going to destroy their SEO, or destroy their site brand, I should say, by injecting SEO into the website. And of course, that's not the case. That's not how it
Like
works.
a virus, it's gonna
Yeah, it's
take
like
over.
spam everywhere, right? No, that's not how it works. And they didn't give us access to the website. So what we did, what I came up with, was this idea for using a proxy server to pull their pages from their site real time and add SEO goodness, like better title tags and
Yes.
more keyword rich text links and things like that in the product copy and that sort of thing into the site real time as a demonstration. And we did that, and they were impressed, and we were able to proceed with the work. But then something else happened that was, again, very fortuitous. These synchronicities and serendipities, they happen all throughout life, and
Yeah.
we don't give them the kind of credit that we should, because they're divine interventions, really.
Right. They
So
can change our total course of everything.
yeah, and that's what happened when I ran up to a code freeze deadline with a different client, Northern Tool. That client was not going to make any changes to their website after September, whatever it was, because they didn't want to mess up the site for the holiday season, have any risk at all of anything breaking and losing all that revenue. So we were running up against a deadline, and they had some technical challenges with the version of the web server software they were running. It didn't support some of the SEO changes that needed to be made, technical changes. Well, the good news was I was able to pitch them on using that technology that I had come up with for showing a demo version of the SEO'd version of the website as a production level alternative to the roadblock that we had hit. And they said yes. And that turned into a product that a software as a service, or SaaS, that ended up generating more revenue than the consulting agency side of the business. And that's why our company, a big reason why our company got acquired a few years later, well, like 7 years later, was because of that technology. It was called Gravity Stream. And we were charging on a cost per click basis for SEO. I don't know anywhere else where you pay on a cost per click like you would with Google ads for SEO. And clients like Nordstrom and Zappos were loving it, and were like paying quite a lot of money to us because it was all in performance, and they were willing to do that. They could compare apples to apples. Like, well, we're paying this for Google ads, and we're paying this for Gravity Stream with Stephan and his company with Net Concepts. So we'll just keep spending the cheaper money over here at 15 cents a click. And we were making a lot of money off of that. And that was, I wouldn't call it a happy accident. It was more just good fortune and kind of divine inspiration. It was really, really amazing.
Right. Yeah. Right time, right place. And then building a tool, right, that was needed to respond to a specific problem. It's a little bit like, and my husband's in biotech, building a therapeutic and then finding out like, oh, it helps with this, all this other stuff too, right? And expanding the use of that particular therapeutic. So it's interesting what you mentioned about people being able to observe the success of SEO and pay per click, right? Because I think SEO, when it comes to at least my experience in talking with a lot of people around trying to get SEO right, is one, a lot of people don't want to deal with it. They want to hire out, they want somebody to handle it for them. And yet I think because of that and not really understanding how it works, a lot of people end up having really frustrating experiences trying to get SEO support in place. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. When you try to hire somebody who's supposedly a specialist in an area that you have no expertise in, you can get snookered. Right? So I have a 1,000-page book on the topic of SEO. I don't know yet of a single person who has hired me who's read this book in its entirety.
Right.
Most SEOs don't even want to read that book in its entirety. And a lot of people have read a lot of it to start their career, but SEO changes and it evolves all the time. So you need to keep up with it. And if you don't keep up with it and you don't understand all the technical nuances and the core principles of it, how can you interview an agency or a consultant or a potential employee to make sure that they're the right hire for the job, that they aren't just blowing smoke? Right. That's where I came up with this concept of an SEO BS detector. It's just a set of questions that anybody can ask, just innocently slipping those into the interview process. And it's a cheat sheet because there's only one right answer to each one. So I'll just give you a quick example.
I love that.
Yeah. So let's say that you asked the question of the SEO candidate or potential agency. Tell me your process for optimizing my meta keywords. Now, this is, for a good SEO, obviously a ridiculous question. And the reason why is because meta keywords never counted in Google, ever. They were never a positive ranking signal, not even in the beginning, in the 90s when Google started. So if they say something like, well, they're not really worth as much now, that's the wrong answer, because they were never worth anything. If they say something like, well, here's our process for doing this, well, that's even worse. Right. That's just one example of the questions, and you can just pick and choose whichever ones you want.
No, that's
And
brilliant. And in a highly technical space, especially as a guy that has all the answers for SEO, it's the thing I love about people that also educate in the space they're in is like you talk about the black box of SEO or whatever. I actually use the same language in the legal space. Like all the legal information that a lot of small businesses, a lot of online businesses need lives inside of a black box. It's really hard for people to get what they need up front, even in order to make some pretty basic decisions about their businesses. And so it's why I spend a lot of time just giving away the map. Like, here's the map. Here's what you need to know about where you're at on the journey and what should be coming next. And that way you can then make the decision from a place of being empowered because you know where you're at on the map. It's not like hunting down and cherry picking your legal needs in the dark, which is what it feels like to a lot of people. And I think SEO probably would be the same way.
yeah, you need to know where you're going, roughly how to get there, but not knowing all the details, and just making sure you hire the right who for the job.
Yes.
That knows all the how, right? This I learned from Strategic Coach. It's all about the who, not the how.
Yeah.
In fact, Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy have a new book out this year called Who, Not How. That's a fantastic book. In order to hire that right who, you need to be smart enough to know, or at least schooled enough to know the right questions to ask. And like I said, I've got that BS detector PDF document. I'll make it available to your listeners for free. I'll put it at marketingspeak.com/Heather so that they can download that. And I also have a hiring blueprint, which is a 7-step process that includes that weaving into the interview these trick questions, but also there's some prep work before you even get to the interview to know that the person or the company is legit. And like, let's say that you're hiring a person, you can make sure that they're attentive to detail, which is very important for SEO, by giving them certain instructions in the job advert.
Yeah.
For example, when I post job adverts, or my team does for me now, we always include something that's like a riddle or a specific instruction that requires them to put something in the subject line, or post a video to us instead of just a regular cover letter, something specific like that. And I do love the problem solving riddle one. That one definitely weeds out a lot of the inappropriate candidates. I was going to say riffraff, but no, nobody's riffraff. We're all equal. It's just some
Totally.
people are more appropriate for the job than others. I want somebody who's attentive to detail, who follows instructions, who cares enough. Like, there's so many people that they just want to hit a button to send out yet another resume, or they don't even read your explanation of the project scope or whatever, and they just send you this boilerplate proposal. It's just awful. So I have this SEO hiring blueprint that will go through those 7 steps, and I'll put that on the free gifts page as well.
Oh, I love that. That I think would really serve people. And yeah, you're right. In response, I even love the idea of like burying in a simple a simple step or requirement as part of a posting or job advertisement, like this word goes in the subject line or something, because you can tell in a hurry who's paying attention. And like you say, it's about getting right fit versus not right fit. And I think it's really important that when we are hiring people to help us build our business, that we are working with folks who are only the right fit. Otherwise, we end up with a string of, engagements that I think, especially for small business owners, it's not like Nike or Starbucks where they have a budget they can throw away on things, not that even big businesses like to do that, but small businesses are so much more constrained. And I think some of these guidelines around even how to find the right people to work with are super important.
Yeah. Well, sometimes even hiring the wrong person is the right thing to do, but in retrospect, because you learned a valuable lesson from it. A quick example of that, maybe not so quick, but it's such a great one. there was a guy that I hired as a graphic designer back in the 90s, and he had this bad habit of talking about me, like gossiping about me behind my back to other staff. And I caught wind of it, and I was immature at the time, and I was in my 20s. And so I really took offense to it. And I just did not like that. So I fired him. And this was the state of Wisconsin, which is a work at will state. So I was totally within my rights.
Mm.
Well, what happened next was he filed a frivolous lawsuit against me. And that then meant depositions and all this headache, right? I would have won, but it would have cost me more to win than it would have to just settle. And so I
Right.
settled. Yeah. And the guy just disappeared off of the face of the map. We were in Madison, Wisconsin, and I spent, multiple years after that in Madison, and so did he. But I'd never heard his name again, seen him. Like, he just vanished. 15 years go by, and then I had just gotten this big awakening in India. I got touched on the head by a monk who zapped me. Like, it's called a Diksha, a oneness blessing. And
Ah,
it was like an LSD trip. Everything was in Technicolor. I felt the deepest sense of peace and
really?
connection. It was beautiful. It
Wow.
was life changing, absolutely life changing. And a few months after that, I was at a different event. This was back in the States and run by Donnie Epstein, the founder of Network Chiropractic. This guy's a wizard. He's amazing. He's a real incredible energy healer and stuff. So
Mm.
I was at his event, and he does these things called energy entrainments. He did an entrainment on me, and I felt so blissed out and everything. And I decided that I'm going to do a remote diksha, or oneness blessing, on a bunch of people while I'm blissed out in this other, like, realm. And this guy, who 15 years ago, just was a big pain in the butt
Yep.
at the time, he comes to my mind. I hadn't thought of him for years, but he
Right.
came to my mind among other people, and I just gave him a remote, like what's called an intent diksha, a
Mm-hmm.
oneness blessing remotely, and a bunch of other people. And guess who calls me 4 days later on my cell phone to apologize after 15 years?
Oh yeah, no coincidence there. I
I know.
totally hear you. It is amazing how when we are intentional with our thoughts in that way, like, you talk about coincidences that will show up and really change the course and not be given the attention that they're due. I think it happens so often. Life
Yeah.
is busy, people are cruising along, they're not really paying as close attention as they could be. And really it's the collective we, right? We all could be paying closer attention. But
Yeah.
it is, yeah, it is really interesting when you have those very poignant experiences that not only teach you something but also remind you how connected we all are.
It's amazing. And we had the most powerful conversation.
Mm,
I told him I had just prayed for him a few days earlier, and it brought him to tears. And we just had this really cathartic healing
mhm.
experience. I had already long forgiven him, but it
Yeah.
was me telling him how appreciative I was of the experience, that I learned how to read contracts to such a high level, because I didn't want to get caught out with another lawsuit or
Right.
unnecessary legal action, and
Yeah.
how I learned how to be a better boss and provide progressive discipline, and not just fire somebody on the spot, especially out of a bruised ego,
Right.
and feeling like,
Mhm.
butt hurt. That wasn't very evolved of me at the time. I recognize that now, but I didn't recognize it then, that I was just being reactive.
Right.
And so I told him all this, and he was so appreciative, and we ended up having dinner
Mm.
like a month later or something, gave him some Tony Robbins DVDs. And I think it really helped him. And then I started seeing him randomly. Like I saw him at a PetSmart when I
Hilarious.
had my daughter with me, and he was with his girlfriend. That was really cool. So even what you think of as a bad hire
Mhm.
is there for a purpose. It's these people are in your life to, teach you a lesson, give you an opportunity to grow. There's a great quote. I forget who came up with it, but temporary people teach permanent lessons.
Mm. Yeah, that is. I have not heard that one before. But it's, this conversation can be had in so many ways because, even in my business, legal issues, like I'm dealing with people's legal issues in their business, right? All day long, all week long. And, people really want to obviously avoid pain, particularly when it comes to legal stuff. And one of the things that I have to tell people regularly is they'll show up and say, "Oh, I want a bulletproof contract." Right? Probably even in your experience, reviewing plenty of contracts in your time building businesses and supporting the wide variety of clients that you have, there is no such thing as a bulletproof contract. Like you can have a really well-built contract and things can still go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And what I tell people is like things are going to go wrong. It's business. And this is how we learn so that we do it better the next time. We avoid this scenario, we spot that red flag, we don't repeat this. And it's, this is the path to growth, even in business building. It is how it goes for us.
Yeah. And there's something to be said for being empathic and balanced instead of bulletproof and one-sided with your contracts and your negotiations and just your business dealings generally. If you have a bulletproof contract, then you have a one-sided contract because you didn't make the other side bulletproof.
Yeah.
You didn't make every indemnification mutual and all. It's just that's not that might work in a very base level in terms
Mhm.
of getting you what you want, but it doesn't serve the greater good, and it doesn't help you karmically.
No, and I'm so glad you said that because one of the other things that I will tell people flat out, if they request certain things or they want certain things drafted a certain way, I'll tell them like, look, I want fairness because I want to support good people doing good business. And that means having fair contracts in place that support the relationship. They don't just support all the interest or the monetary side of one side or the other. That's not what contracts are there for. It's not who I serve. It's not how I do contracts. It's never how I've done contracts. And so I love that you say that because some people don't recognize that at whatever stage they're in. They just want something that feels like a bulletproof shell. And it really should not be the goal.
Yeah.
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 So I
I've
love that.
even reviewed a contract more than once where there were typos or mistakes in them, and let the other party know it so that they could, avoid the embarrassment next time. And
Right.
not that it would change the intent of the clauses, but just having typos or poor grammar or whatever is not a good reflection. And if I caught it, then other people are going to catch it too. So
Yeah.
I just believe in good business karma. What goes around comes around. If you're going to be a good person in business, then you're going to get rewards, not necessarily in that
Mhm.
relationship, but just overall. That's how the universe works.
Yeah.
It's the law of cause and effect.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, what goes around comes around, including in business. I think right now is a good time for a pause. So I'm going to
Yep.
hit pause on this recording, give you a minute or two. Let me just widen my screen so the buttons come back. Okay. Well, one of the things that I love that you already have brought to this conversation, Stephan, is a lot of concepts, first of all, from the personal development world, right? I think that I can't remember if we were talking before we went live. I mean, and my personal belief is that our development in business, period, is maxed out and limited by our personal abilities, our personal development, our personal growth, our willingness to expand, our ideas, our beliefs, our concepts. When did that journey start for you? It sounds like there might have been a point in time where you weren't really into that yet, and I could be wrong. And then obviously you have learned a lot and you've done some really interesting things in your journey when it comes to personal development. Can you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah. Well, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom in order to be shaken awake. And that's kind of what happened with me. I was going through a divorce. Was in 2008, 2009. And three different friends, all within a very short span of time, independently told me, Stephan, you need to go to this Tony Robbins event, but you really need to. I guess I was in a pretty bad place. I know I was, and it was obvious to others. So I went to Unleash the Power Within. I had no idea what I was in for. I didn't know anything about Tony Robbins. I just knew he was like an infomercial guy or something. I did not know that I was signing up to do a fire walk on 2,000-degree hot coals in my bare feet. I did not know that.
Oh my
And that
gosh,
was the end of the first day.
that wasn't like a big disclaimer out front, you know?
No, my friends failed to relay that piece of information, that vital piece of information. Anyways, I did it. I didn't think I was going to. I was pretty shocked hearing about it in the first day of the seminar. So a lot of the first day was preparing us to have the mindset to be able to do this. And that was a pivotal moment in my life, walking across those coals in my bare feet and not even getting a blister, let alone burned, was a metaphor for how my life could go from that point forward, that I don't need to be afraid of everything, that I could, for example, finally go and get LASIK. Yeah, I was terrified to have my eyes operated on, but I was wearing glasses and I didn't want to be wearing glasses my whole adult life. So I went 3 weeks afterwards and got LASIK. No more glasses.
Wow.
3 months after this Tony Robbins event, I went and got a hair transplant. And 6 months, 7 months, 8 months later, after my hair grew in from the hair transplant, people didn't recognize me.
Yeah, I bet.
Between that and the glasses and I had braces to straighten my teeth. I had made diet changes and started exercising. I looked very different. People didn't recognize me. I would speak at conferences, SEO conferences, and people wouldn't know if I wasn't on stage that it was me. I would walk up to a group of people who I knew pretty well, and in a cocktail reception, and they wouldn't know who I was until they saw my badge. I would sometimes hide my badge so that it was a big surprise, and they wouldn't. That was fun for a while, but of course,
Yeah.
everybody
Hey,
knows
Bob.
me as this guy now. But the thing I never got tired of, I still don't get tired of, is like, Stephan, you look younger every time I see you. I that's like music to my ears. And
Right.
if you look at the before photos of what I used to look like in 2007, 2008, I looked 15 years older than I do now. And that was 13 years ago.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Isn't that amazing? That is wild. It's interesting because I've heard about firewalks. I actually have a friend who is in the business coaching world, and he went to become a trainer on how to train people at his events to do the firewalks. And there was a part of me that was always kind of like, like, I don't really get the whole, in my mind, like subjecting yourself to that level of fear or pain. But here I'm hearing from you that it was like it was pivotal.
Yeah. And at that point, I was still agnostic, borderline atheist. I was really disconnected, but I was able to really get more back in my body and be more present and just more self-confident. That was really, really helpful. And then I joined Tony Robbins Platinum Partnership, and I was able to travel the world. It's a very expensive program. It's a 6-figure a year investment.
Wow.
But I had sold my company, so I was able to, spend this kind of money. And I had just such incredible experiences. That awakening event that happened in India was at a Tony Robbins event that was only for
Oh.
platinum partners.
Oh,
It was a
interesting.
oneness trip. Yes. So we went to
Mm,
Udaipur, to this palace on one of the little islands in Udaipur. We went to Varanasi and saw bodies getting burned on the banks of the Ganges, the Ganga River. It was incredible. And I mean, you can't put a price tag to a spiritual awakening. I didn't know that that's what I was going to get. And
yeah.
then 2 months later, after that event, I went to Date with Destiny, which is an amazing event of Tony's. I can't recommend it enough. That's where I met my wife. So at the
Yay.
time, she wasn't, of course, my wife. She was a stranger. But when I met her, it was everything, like the stars were aligned, the planets aligned, whatever you want to say. Yeah, it was all divinely orchestrated because I had prayed for her to show up 12 hours before we met. I wrote
Wow.
up on my poster board that was for the event, like this is exercise you do where you come up with your towards values, your away from values, your mission statement, your power
Mm,
virtues, all this stuff. And the relationship vision is the part of that poster board where I just from my heart poured out what I wanted from my soulmate and who I would be for her and how the relationship would be. And then I prayed, and I prayed for her to show up right away. And
wow.
12 hours later, mutual friend introduced us. And 5 minutes into it, maybe 10, I knew she was the one. I knew she was my soulmate. And the way I did was because 2 months earlier in India, I learned how to give those oneness dikshas, the blessings. And everybody in the event pretty much gets a diksha on the last night, but not everybody. Some people,
Mm,
they say, oh, it's kind of chaotic and not super organized. It's dark and, the music and everything. So she didn't get touched. She didn't get a diksha. And so I'm like, oh, I can give you one. And so when I put my hands on her head and I connected to the divine and to the creator to pass divine grace through me to her, the more you pray for the person, the more you want it for them, the more divine grace passes to the person. And I was praying for her like she was my soulmate. And I knew. So I was like straight away organizing a ring and everything. And I proposed to her 9 days after we met in a
oh
hot air
my.
balloon.
Whoa.
Yeah,
I
talk about a captive audience. Hot air
right.
balloon above the Las Vegas desert. There's nowhere for her to run.
We are
And
not
the
going back
pilot,
down unless you give me the right
right.
answer.
Well, the pilot told me he's never had a failed proposal. He had 100% hit rate. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this. And yep, I was his first failure because she said no. She said
Whoa.
no. She said, well, no, not yet.
Hmm,
It had only been 9 days after all, right? So she
right.
had some sense about her, and I was just so impetuous because I just knew. So it was a very awkward, uh, uh, teary 20-minute descent back down to earth, literally. But it actually brought us closer together. We were inseparable. And then 9 months after, I re-proposed to her, and that time she said
Mm,
yes. And that time
wow.
I proposed to her at the spot where she had prayed for me to show up 48 hours prior to us meeting. There's this little waterfall at on the resort, and she didn't figure it out. We went to the resort to stay, the same one where Tony had the event. And I arranged for her to have a mani-pedi beforehand, because I know that's important for women to have their nails done. And she didn't figure it out. It was a complete surprise, which
Oh
was
my gosh.
awesome. And yeah, so she said yes, and we have a little baby. He's not so little anymore. He just turned 2. And
Mm.
yeah, I'm very blessed, very, very blessed. And this was all divinely orchestrated. So be precise with what
Yeah.
you ask for, what you pray for. I use those words right away. And you know, someday I'd like to have the house of my dreams. Someday I'd like to, what? Okay, well, you just push that out into the future.
Mm. Well, I love the comment around specificity. And even in regards to timing, it's interesting because in in my life, when I remember writing a list down, like, this is what I want, in a partner, in my person. And that was in college. That was back in college that I wrote that list down. I think we don't always get the choice in timing, right? Sometimes we have really strong preferences about what we want. And really quick, I'm just going to pause. Can you hear any glitchiness on your end? Nope, it's good.
Nope.
Okay. I think sometimes we don't always get our choice in timing, because I do know that there is such thing as divine timing, right? And sometimes we maybe just have other lessons to learn. But it was interesting because my husband and I had a very similar, like, fast falling in love experience. And we both knew really early on, like 9-10 day kind of a window. And it still took us a few months before we got engaged, like September to December. But it, by a lot of standards, that was still pretty short.
Yeah,
But
that
I
is.
found, after we got married and we're into our relationship, I actually found that list that I wrote back in college, which I hadn't seen in forever. And I did not realize, like, I was specific down to like physical attributes and certain things where I was like, what? Like, I was laughing at myself even that I wrote the list, but it was very accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it creeped me out a little bit. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I joke because between those time periods, I've learned a lot about life and a lot about how things work. And like you, I've come to trust that, what we ask for shows up, and that being clear really helps. And that we still don't always get the choice on exactly how it presents itself, because we are also just designed to learn certain things while we're here.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
generally includes some amount of hardship.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you want to learn it the easy way, which is without pain and suffering, you just have to be proactive and preemptive, right? So the
Mm,
universe drops these little feathers that gently land on your shoulder to nudge you to do something that are very easy to
miss.
ignore. But
Yeah.
then the bricks come if you ignore them, right? And when those fall on you, that hurts. And some people just, darn it, they're going to ignore those bricks. I'm sure, you know what I'm talking about. There are
Yeah.
people that you wonder, why are they doing that? Why are they ignoring those bricks?
Yes.
I ignored bricks. I'm sure everyone listening has had those experiences of ignoring the bricks. And then the
Yeah.
Mack truck comes, and the Mack
Yeah.
truck is devastating. And that could be a disastrous falling out in a marriage. It could be
Yeah.
a potentially terminal illness. It could be financial ruin, bankruptcy, any number of different things that shake us awake.
Yeah.
You might need that.
Yeah.
You might need it, but hopefully we get it early. And Tony Robbins has this expression that I don't know if he got it from somewhere, but life happens for you, not to you.
Yep.
And I learned recently from a friend in another mastermind I'm in metal, Neil Cannon. He told me that life not just happens for you, but also by you. It's
Mm,
another level, right? So if life happens by you, that means that we take responsibility as essentially directors of our own movie, or the pilot of our own ship, or our captain of our own ship, pilot of our own airplane, right? And that's how it works. I did not know this. I didn't know about conceptually, I knew about the multiverse, that there are parallel universes, and but the way this shows up from a very pragmatic standpoint is we are the director of our own universe, our own little slice of the multiverse. And that doesn't encompass simply our little supposed sphere of influence of our family, our friends, our neighborhood, our community. It's the entire world. Now, I did not know this until recently, and this isn't some epiphany that happened after going to India shortly afterwards. It took until this year until I had a big awakening that happened in January, on January 22nd. And then I was like able to see the matrix. But until then, I was still pretty clueless. And like I didn't really buy into the whole psychic thing. I didn't think that I was psychic or anybody I knew was psychic, or that was even a thing. I had zero interest in ever getting a reading, or so there were aspects of me that was where I was still a skeptic. And skepticism and cynicism are really two sides of the same coin. If you're going to go through life as a cynic, that's an old crank. Nobody wants to be around that person. So I don't recommend it. But if you're operating from this place of the willing suspension of disbelief, then anything is possible. And when you take this seriously, of being a pilot of your own airship, of a director of your movie, then you can have things manifest for you instantly. And just a quick example, something that happened a month ago. I wanted to drop off, or I wanted to send a package via FedEx, and I didn't want to have to look for the drop off locations, go out of my way. And I was only going a half mile away. I was dropping my mother-in-law off for her Tai Chi class. It was a half mile away. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to try this co-creating thing, because co-creating, manifesting is exactly that thing I described. You just decide you're going to have something show up. And it's not from an arrogant standpoint. It's from a belief that anything's possible because this universe is for you, this particular universe of the multiverse. And not even a minute later, a FedEx truck showed up in the middle of the street, between the lanes, going the two different directions. And the guy was in the back, truck open, and I didn't have to go a millimeter out of my way. I just slowed down, handed him the package, and he scanned it, and off I went. That's how everything can work for the most part. I mean, yes, there are some lessons that you're meant to learn that you may not enjoy, and therefore you may not order up on the menu. And they come anyways, because that was like a soul contract. That was something that was kind of preordained, a supposed chance meeting that wasn't chance, right?
Yeah.
And it could be for good, it could be for pain, because you need that pain in order to wake up in some respect, to forgive, or to settle some karmic debt. Who knows, right? But yeah, everything happens for a reason. There's nothing random. And that blows my mind still, even though I learned that about 8 months ago through this awakening. So it's an exciting time for all of us to be alive, because this is a momentous moment in history. Looking back, future generations be like, wow, that was a pivotal change of everything.
Yeah.
Because I know that we're going to clean up the oceans. We're going to get ourselves in gear, and we're going to do things that are going to shift this downward trajectory down into the abyss. We're going to come out of this. And yeah, it takes people being courageous and willing to speak the truth, and to be judged and ridiculed and ostracized. But there are going to be enough people that this is going to tip. The tipping point will hit, and it's going to be a beautiful world. It's going to be beautiful.
I love that. Well, and even just the reminder, I think there was a thought that I was thinking about spirituality, and some people go looking for it. And I think for others, it comes and finds them, right? This
Yeah.
concept of like expanding what we are truly able to see in life. And it can also happen in layers. Like you've had different kind of levels of that expansion happening. And then even recently, one that sounds like, blew the lid off. And,
Yeah.
for me, it's been over the years, series of losses, lost my mom young, lost my sister in a car accident. Like things have been very specific that have shifted certain ways that I see life and see our relationship to it. And, but it's always been in service of a more beautiful vision of what is actually there. And, even with my son, who is, he's special needs and he's about 9 now, but we talk a lot about my mom being gone, a lot about my sister being gone. We've had other deaths in the family, but we talk a lot about who's missing because it's been whittled down, and especially for the people that we were really connected to. And one day he was like, "Mom, how do you know that they're still connected? How do you know that, how do you know that we're all connected?" And I said, "Well, let's just try it." He's like, "Well, can I talk to Aunt Haley?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will she know?" I said, "Yeah." And he just went out into the backyard and said, and I had told him about how the summer that she died, she sent me hummingbirds, like literally every day to my face. Like no joke, they'd be a foot away, flying so obvious in front of like it was just undeniable. And it was this pattern, and and I'd be really deep in
That's
thought,
beautiful.
or tears over her. And every time it was like every day, this daily thing. And so I had described this to my son, and he said, "Aunt Haley, I want you to send me a hummingbird, and I want it to come," and he was in the back corner of the yard. "I want it to come right above me and go like way up high." This was a few years ago, so he wasn't using specifics, but way up high, and then come back down. Like he gave it a very specific thing to do. Literally, a few seconds later, here's a hummingbird, shoots up into the sky, like high as the trees, comes back down. He looked at me with these huge eyes, and I said, "Yeah, she's listening. We're connected." And he was like, that moment on, like he knows the power of connection. Like he lived it in that moment as a little tiny person, just being willing to believe that. And, there've been other experiences like that, but back to your point about being willing to suspend disbelief. I think as adults, we can get so locked in and so sometimes just so worn down. Like it can be really hard to shift into curiosity, it can be
Yeah,
hard to get
and
to that place.
inadvertently we can cut off the curiosity and the connection that our children have. Right? You did your boy such a service to encourage him to ask for a without a doubt sign like he did, and for him to receive that, he has that for his whole life. But then there are other people who do the exact opposite. They crush the little child's sense of connection by denying their reality. Like, "Daddy, Mommy, I just saw an angel. I just saw a fairy, right? I just saw Grandma."
Yep.
And no, you didn't. You're imagining things. Who are you even talking to?
Yeah.
This playing with imaginary friends thing, that's got to stop, because you're about to go to school and you just killed their connection.
Yeah. Well, my daughter at the age of 1.5, our neighbor who we used to call Grandpa Ben was really close to us, like family. He was like our grandpa. And he passed away when he was 97, 98, just a few years ago. And Henley, who just turned 4 this summer, she was a baby when he passed. So she didn't really ever know him in the way that a child comes to know, a loved one. But she knew of him because we kept his memory alive. And at 1.5, she was very verbal, and she was standing blah, blah, at the back door doing something. And I couldn't tell, like, was she watching a squirrel, what was up? And I asked her, Miss Henley, what are you doing at the back door? And she turned and pointed and very clearly said, Grandpa Ben. And I was like, oh, and I fully knew in that moment, like he'd been there chatting with her. How, as a 1.5-year-old, would she know to even, say who he was? And I said, Grandpa Ben. I said, where does Grandpa Ben live? And she turned and pointed right to his house. Like she knew. And there's no way to really explain that in a rational mind, right? In a rational way, if you're trying to rationalize things from the brain of a 1.5-year-old. So why not believe? Why not get curious?
Amazing.
Right? It really does just make the world such a more beautiful place to get curious.
Yeah. And the great thing about this is it doesn't just change you and your close loved ones. It changes the field around you, and everybody who touches your field is changed. It is contagious. It's viral.
Love that.
Awakening is viral. It's powerful. And so a quick example, one of my staff at our agency, she knew all the amazing stuff that's been happening and the connections I've been having, the without a doubt signs and everything. And she decided to talk to her mom while she was alone in the car. Her mom had passed. And she asked for a without a doubt sign. It wasn't even seconds later. She turned the corner and there was an owl just right in the road, blocking her path. And it stayed there for 10 minutes. So it was a side street. So she was able to stop and just park, and they just had to stare down. And it was just, she knew without a doubt that was her mom. Her mom was occupying that owl's body temporarily to let her know, just like the hummingbirds, and with your loved ones. That's one of the ways they leave signs or communicate. Another might be feathers just keep showing up in your path over a period of time, or
certain
pennies
color,
or whatever.
Yes.
Yep. So certain songs keep showing up on the radio when you turn on the radio. Like this sort of stuff is possible because you got to think of this life not like a physical reality, but more like a movie, like the Truman Show. And it can be edited in real time. So that is such a powerful example for her, taking something that she learned to just ask for without a doubt sign, and then to receive it so quickly like that is really, really powerful. And then you can start, going to the next level and saying, well, I want to be able to communicate. I don't just want a sign that they're here, that they're watching over me, but I want to be able to get downloads like in the movie The Matrix, right? I want to be able to learn Kung Fu in 5 minutes. And that sort of stuff can happen too.
Yeah, well, it is. Once you start thinking about the possibilities, I mean, it does kind of blow your mind. I have this fun game that I play, not so much during COVID because we never go anywhere right now, but pre-COVID with my kids. And I call it our parking ferries. I'm like, we have parking ferries because I get super irritated if I have to drive around and wait, right? So I started this game a long time ago where I was like, okay, we have parking ferries and they are going to help us pull right up to where we need to go. And there's going to be a spot. And I just say this out loud and I'm talking to my kids about it. And inevitably, I can literally go anywhere and get a spot right where I think it's going to be. And I've told this to my husband, who at first was kind of like, but he's, we've now been together for 10 years. He has seen it in action. I think probably kind of believes that I have parking ferries. And that's probably a far stretch for him, at the time that we met. Well, one time my sister was meeting me at a place, and in my head, I was like, I want this very specific portion of the parking lot because there's an area in Seattle called University Village, but it's got crazy parking. Like I did not want to drive up 8 levels into the parking garage. There's surface parking in this one spot. It's limited. I wanted the primo spot. So I said this, sure enough, pull in. It's there. Literally, I'm driving around and this guy pulls out right in front of me. I pull in, it was perfect. My sister is pulling in like 30 seconds behind me. She does not live in Seattle. This is a rare chance we got to meet and have dinner because she was here on business. And I just literally said out loud, like, I want the spot next to me to open up. And she's pulling in. This woman walks out, pulls out of that spot, and she literally pulls right around the corner and pulls right in next to me. My sister was laughing because I'm on the phone with her the entire time. And so I'm saying this, and here we were. And like, it feels a little bit silly to say this out loud. And yet there is a level of like fun about it that becomes this game of co-creation. Like, I wonder what could happen. I wonder what if, like, what if I just pretended that this was possible? Right. And it's a small example.
We are so much more powerful than we possibly could imagine.
Yeah. It's just such a fun reminder.
And we relegate this responsibility, many of us do, of co-creating. It's as important of a responsibility and a gift as free will. We got the gift of free will. We got the gift of co-creation. We get to co-create with the creator. And then we just kind of go through life on autopilot. I'm talking hypothetically, not pointing any fingers, but certainly that was how I lived a big portion of my life. I was asleep for the first 42 years in some respects, not completely, but
it's a common
disconnected. Story. I was unplugged.
Yeah. It's a common theme. And I think even for those of us who have awakened to some level, it's still, I feel like we can still have periods where it's easy to kind of slip back into autopilot a little bit, or forget about how powerful and how resourceful we really can be, And so anyways, this is not the way by any means that I expected this conversation to go. And it's been so fun and such a good reminder of what is there for us. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you as well for being so open and sharing of your experiences, because this is not something that is easy to put yourself out there and say, hey, I've had a without a doubt sign that there is something beyond this physical reality.
Right.
You open yourself up to judgment. And
totally.
I mean, if nobody judges you, you're not living a very fulfilled life. You're not standing in your truth. You're just hiding. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
No. And yet, actually, this is a perfect tie-in, because I wanted to get around to reminding people that you are the host of 2 different podcasts. I can hardly keep my hands around one, but congrats. And I've listened to your podcast and it's amazing. So for anybody listening, I want you to get over and check out both Get Yourself Optimized, and if you're in the business world, check out Marketing Speak. But I listened to your one on narcissism, right? With Dr. Ramani. Is that her name? Did I say it right?
Yep. Ramani Durvas.
Ramani. So, okay. I said it a little bit wrong. And she was amazing. And what it reminds me is that, back to like sometimes learning life lessons the hard way or having challenging circumstances. I think part of my willingness now to be judged is because I had certain challenging experiences already, in my first core family around judgment. And you learn at some point to deal with those lessons, right? And those are gifts. They end up being gifts in our life, even when they feel like tremendous challenges. And so, I won't get into the specifics of what Dr. Ramani is an expert on, but it's a really important thing that we face those areas in our life that feel like they're giving us challenges, because they truly are a gift, and they can lead us to so much more freedom in other areas of our life, right, as we continue.
Yeah, so true. And my wife, Orion, has this great expression that she says, sometimes these things are all gifts, but sometimes the bow is on the bottom. And so you don't recognize, therefore, that it's a gift until maybe later. And By the way, she also is a podcaster. She has a show called Stellar Life, and it's all about personal development and all that, spirituality and everything too. So couples who podcast together stay together.
There you go. Stellar Life. Let's put a plug in for that. Check that one out as well. And I love that phrase, sometimes the bow is on the bottom. But the other thing about, people judging us, because I think whatever we do and whatever path we're on, especially if it involves growth, we're going to be judged. And yet there was a phrase I learned a long time ago about, what people think of me, it's really none of my business. And I remember being able to fully accept that and just be like, oh yeah, the truth of that is so obvious. And it makes it all okay. What people think of me is none of my business. It doesn't have to be. And so it's fine, whatever they think of me.
I love that too. Yep. That's a great quote.
Excellent. Well, Stephan, I feel like we could go on and on. I want to be respectful of your time. For folks that are listening today, be sure to pop over to the show notes. We're going to have links to where Stephan is at online. Stephan, I want to hear from you about where you show up online, where you'd like people to connect with you. I know you've already mentioned a couple gifts that you're going to make available, so we'll put those in the links as well. Where are you online, and where would you like people to seek you out if you are on social media or you want people to connect with you there? And then the last question will be, final takeaways that you want people to walk away with.
Okay, sure. So I am at stephanspencer.com. That's my personal website. I have a blog there, a lot of resources. And netconcepts.com is the agency website where they can inquire about services, SEO, online marketing, and so forth. I also have the podcast websites, getyourselfoptimized.com and marketingspeak.com. And then on social media, I'm most active on Twitter.
Okay.
So that is S Spencer is my username there, my Twitter handle. And I'd love to hear from anybody. If they want to send me an email, feel free, me at stephanspencer.com, STEPHAN.
Love that. Stephan, thank you so much for joining me. I just love our conversation. I love where it went and your willingness to be so open and generous with your thoughts and your experience. What final takeaways do you want people to either walk away with, or action steps? Could be either one.
Yeah. Well, what comes to me is for people to pay attention and act on their intuition, because intuition, which I did not understand until this year, is actually the angels and your spirit guides whispering into your consciousness. I thought it was like a gut thing, like my gut knows, right? No, it's actually from other realms. And the way to tell that it's an intuitive hit and not just your subconscious mind is to simply check for three things. One, is it coming in completely unexpected? That's a good sign. Number two, is it charge neutral? Is it emotionally uncharged? There's no anxiety, fear, excitement, anything attached to that thought or that idea or whatever. And then third, it doesn't lead anywhere. It just sits there. It simply is. Right? So your subconscious will start making stuff up and jump from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next. That's how you know that it's not an intuitive hit. Right? Next thing you know, oh yeah, I got to pick up the milk from the store, right? That's not intuition, whereas intuition just sits there. It doesn't jump from place to place to place. So those are the three things to think about, to recognize, and then act on those intuitive hits, because that's where all the juice is.
I love that. I'd never thought about that piece where it kind of just sits on its own, right? It's delivered, boom. It's a little bit like in my mind, I pictured like a letter in your old fashioned door slit box, right through the middle, like boom, there it is. Nothing else. That's, I love that. That's a really fun way to think about it. And I think for folks that pay attention to intuition, they know the truth of that when they hear it described that way.
Yep. And for those who aren't connected in this sort of way, just try it. Just suspend disbelief and see what shows up. And you could even ask for without a doubt signs. So, you know what? I'm going to ask for feathers to show up in my path all week. Or I'm going to ask for a prophetic dream or like some sort of vision. And you'll be amazed what shows up if you just simply ask.
Oh, it's so true. The power in asking. Stephan, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to have you here today. Folks, if you're listening, be sure to pop over to legalwebsitewarrior.com/podcast. So grateful to have you. Leave a rating and a review while you're there. Let people know that you've been listening, that you like it, and that Stephan's content today was amazing, which it was. So grateful for you, and we will see you next week.